We're now going to move our attention to our region, to Madison, Dane County, and the growth of our region and what that means for all of us. And as I've taught, I'll introduce our panel here in just a second, but just to sort of give you an idea of how I conceived of this panel today. All of you have heard from me for a couple of years now, but for years, that one of the things that undergirds our real estate market, and it makes it as powerful as it is the fact that we are the fastest growing region in the state and one of the fastest growing regions in the country. And when your region is growing, demand for housing is growing, and when demand for housing is growing, you know that the housing market is going to be, in the long term, fundamentally healthy. But we're also going through some great changing times, and the growth of Madison and our region is going to carry with it a lot of ramifications. And so I thought what might be interesting today was to bring in a panel of experts who are sort of at the forefront of helping us manage through this change, and help you guys and maybe even each other and themselves understand better what the future of our region looks like. Where are we going? What does it mean for us? How does it affect not only housing, but our quality of life and all the different things that go along with it? So what's driving it, all those sorts of things. So I think it's going to be a fascinating panel. We'll just go from here, Jason Fields from MadRep, Ellie Westman Chin from Destination Madison, Zach Brandon from the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce, and Chad Lawler from the Madison Builders Association. So they can each tell you a little bit more about themselves, but we're going to start with Zach. He's got a few slides that he wants to talk about. I know a number of you you've heard Zach talk before. I served on the board with Zach. Zach, why don't you kick us off and help us understand where our region is going.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave. I want to say, when you think about the chamber and who we are, we've been around for, in the current iteration, for more than a century. Stark family fingerprints are all over that century, and so it's exciting to be in this space. I hadn't seen it since it's been remodeled, to be here with you to talk about what's going on in the economy. We are a large regional chamber, so I think 1,200 plus members. We don't follow a geographic territory that's upright line. We say Greater Madison. People always say, what is that? And we say if you recruit here, live here, based here, fly out of here, entertain here, or if somebody overseas asks you where you were based and you said Madison, Wisconsin, you're in Greater Madison. What that means from a member standpoint, think Land's End, the Trek, up into Baraboo and down into Janesville. That's kind of the region that we follow and talk about. I want to leave you with I'm going to pre-populate some thoughts for you, but I'm mostly interested in the questions that you have. Like, what's on your mind? What are on your clients' minds? What are the things that most interest you? But if nothing else, I want you to take away a few things from the things I say. It starts with, we're all looking for a crystal ball, right? Whether we're all trying to figure out where the future is. We do this in the stock market all the time, we do this in real estate investment. You're trying to predict what the future looks like. If you were doing that around place, what would that look like? What would be the indicators? What would be the sort of key points that you'd be looking for? The next slide. And here's what I would say is there are sort of 4 key indicators you should be looking for across the country. One is, where are the next wave of jobs happening? And specifically a certain type of job, innovation jobs. So where are innovation jobs occurring, not just tech, but broad, advanced manufacturing, biotech, digital tech, where are those jobs occurring? You expect the dark blue, right? Seattle, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, San Diego, Boston, those are the superstar cities of innovation in the world, but certainly in the United States. What you're looking for is the light blue. You're looking for, where is the puck going, not where has it been. And if you look at the Midwest, there's a lot of red, which is not a good color when it comes to innovation jobs. A lot of the cities that some people say, Minneapolis, Chicago, that are cities to pay attention to in the Midwest, are shedding these jobs over the last decade and a half. You look at that big blue bubble, Madison, Wisconsin, right there in the Midwest. And so from 2005 to 2019, the Midwest share of innovation jobs is happening right here in your own backyard. Next slide. Dave mentioned it, but where's population growing? So here you're seeing what happened through the pandemic. You see the map, so 2 different sets of data, so don't want you to confuse it, but you see the map. You're looking for green. You don't want purple. You see the Midwest, there's a lot of gray and a lot of purple, so especially in the lower Midwest, not great indicators. That data is based on counties, so not all those counties have big populations to base off of, right? So it may have big growth, but it has small population base. What you're looking there is Madison, Wisconsin is one of the places in the upper Midwest and the Midwest that's growing. But maybe more importantly, when you're thinking about what are the largest cities, so a county can grow, but it may mean that a metro is not growing. A perfect example of that is, think about Milwaukee. The city of Milwaukee lost people during the pandemic, but the surrounding areas still continue to grow, not at the levels that we hope or want or need, but Ozaukee, Waukesha, the WOW counties, Washington, those counties grew, where Milwaukee City proper didn't, or Madison did. And we're now the 15th largest Midwest city. So city proper, not region, not metro, not county. And we're the only city with significant growth during the pandemic. So you look at those red arrows going down, that means those cities were shrinking during the pandemic. A red arrow goes sideways means that it was climbing just slightly. And a green arrow going sideways means it just grew a little bit. The only city in the top 15 that grew significantly during the pandemic was Madison, Wisconsin. Next slide. And then where is the next generation going? So we all hear about we're sort of over millennials, we're now in the Gen Z, sorry if you're a millennial, we've kind of gotten over you, we have new talent to worry about, behaviors. Gen Z is the new, exciting demographic. It's right. And so 18 to 26, that's the demographic that we're all kind of watching now. Where are they going? They're going here. So raw numbers in the country, we're number 9 in the country for raw net migration. This isn't off a base. So it's not just saying, hey, we're a medium-sized city with big growth. Raw numbers, number 9 in the country. Number 6 is Nashville, number 5 is Austin. The difference between those cities, those are booming cities, is 500 people. Epic alone will hire 1,300 people in the next 12 months net on top of what they are based. There's no reason why we won't be in the top 5 in under 2 years when it comes to that. Number 1 in the country where Gen Z is finding jobs. And because of that, we're one of only 5 cities in America where more than 20% of the workforce is now in that demographic of 18 to 26. So people say, well, that's the college. It's not. It's the workforce. And they're moving here at an accelerated pace. And because of that, Gen Z net migration into Wisconsin. Wisconsin now leads the Midwest in Gen Z migration. When's the last time someone said that Wisconsin was actually a brain gain dynamic, not a brain drain dynamic? And the reason for that is 85% of that's occurring in this region. So this region is not only changing the national story, its own story, it's changing the state story because of the amount of people that are moving here and that all important demographic. That's the renter today, and that's a home buyer tomorrow. And then final slide, almost final slide. And then where are we gonna have to live? And climate resiliency is one thing that a lot of people aren't yet talking about, but I would tell you, be paying very close of attention to this if you wanna figure out 30, 40, 50 years from now where people are gonna live. Wildfires, flooding, erosion of our coastal lines, heat waves. You're gonna wanna invest in the 43rd to 44th parallel anywhere in the world. So if you want to invest in Mongolia, it might not be a bad place to invest. But Madison, Wisconsin is in that parallel, and I would say to you, if you're looking for urban density, population opportunities, technology-based businesses, an economy that's growing, and a climate that can withstand global climate change, you're in the place. And so those 4 dynamics in the next slide will tell you when you're looking at a crystal ball, this is what you should be looking at is Madison, Wisconsin. I will also say that I could not find a crystal ball that had Madison's Capitol dome inside of it, and so AI created that. So, that picture does not really exist. AI created it.
All right, well there's already unbelievable fodder for questions and all of that. And by the way, once we get through our presentations, questions from the audience, more than welcome. Don't rely just on me. So Jason, we're gonna go to you next. Jason Fields is the
You guys literally have me following Zach. What's wrong with these dudes?
And we all kind of just bask in his glow.
I just thought it was a suit upgrade. That's the next best suit.
So Jason is the CEO of MadRep, Madison Regional Economic Planning Organization. And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna give a little history, because a lot of people may not know this, maybe we're gonna do this. MadRep was started back when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. And the reason I know this is because when there was an event called Advance Now. The idea was to try to see if we could try to figure out how to create better and more organized economic development in the Madison region. And there used to be the precursor of MadRep, it's called Thrive. And we renamed it MadRep, and we repositioned it vis-a-vis the chamber. So we did a number of things with the express idea of attempting to create a more effective regional planning and regional development organization. So Jason took over, what, 3-4 years ago now?
It'll be 3 years in January.
3 from Paul Jade, who was the original CEO. And he's done a great job. I also sit on this board and work with Jason on regional planning initiatives. So Jason, give us your take on what's going on in this region from where you sit.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So, one, thank you all for having us. I work with this crew here quite a bit, and Zach and I go back when we were both in government. I was a former state legislator and stockbroker, and so we go way back. And so when I got this position, it's funny, he was the first person to send me something on LinkedIn saying, "Welcome to the town, bro." But I had to get permission from my wife to move here. And so once she said yes, we moved here in 2021. And it's been great. It's been very great. One of the things, or a couple of things that I look at as MadRep, we have some of the similarities with the chamber. We have 8 counties in our district, in our region. We are one of 9 economic development partners with the state of Wisconsin. And so for us, when we talk about economic development, the goal for us is to, what I always say is, ask and answer this question. Is our region a great place to live, work, and play? If the answer to that is yes, can we be better? If the answer to that is no, then what do we need to do in order to get to a yes? And then there's some subset of questions. For who? Because we cannot deny that there is always a sort of tale of two economies. Thinking, for example, if you look at the Wisconsin State Journal today, there was an article, I didn't get a chance to read it all, but when you look at the housing market, that we have to address this rising tide lifts all boats, and you have people in underserved demographics being priced out of the housing market. So if we don't begin to look at some of those things, then the question for all of us is, what does that mean? So, first slide. So, I think that's the second. That's the first one. I'm gonna kill you. Don't tell her I said that. I'm afraid of Jen. So we all did when we talked about this place to live, this region. When I got here, I tell everybody, it was like joining the Lakers. It was like, this was showtime for me. And when you look at it, when you look at the statistics, what Ellie does, what Zach and all those guys do, we rank in the #1 region. We rank #1 in a number of categories, or we're always in the top 10. And so in 2022, there was an article that said Madison was one of the top destinations for U-Hauls coming here. And so that's the stuff that I look at, you want to see. Next question, or next slide. So the 8 counties, here's the, it's good, but it's also concerning. When you look at, as Zach said, the population trend, people want to be here because the quality of life, jobs, the things you can do, the travel time, which is really weird to me because you all here act like 15 minutes is like when I moved here, they say, Jason, it's so far away. How far is 15 minutes? I do that every day. So 15 minutes is nothing. So here's what we see in the 8 county regions, and I don't want to read all of that, but our population is growing in our 8 county regions. But when you look at Dane County, it's growing even more. The problem that will present to us is where are all these people going to go? Where are they going to live if we don't address this housing situation? And yes, some of the outer areas, we call them ring areas outside of Dane County, yes, some of them want to be bedrock communities, but when we do a SWOT analysis and we go to each county, a lot of counties don't know what they want to be just yet. And so what happens is your young people see Madison, Dane County, and want to be here. Where are these people going to stay if we don't address this housing issue? Last slide. One of the things that we're looking at and we monitor is that Wisconsin will need to build around 140,000 units by 2030. Now, if the federal government is increasing, interest rates are rising, building permits are not being released, developers are now slowing down, that presents a problem for us that we have to monitor and address. And so now we're starting to look at how do we attack this problem. You'll start to see more funds, housing funds, venture debt funds, but these are things that we'll have to tackle if we want this region to continue to be a great place to live, work, and play. And I'll say this and I'll be quiet. And one of the things that concerns me, and I'm from Milwaukee and I've seen this happen. My wife is from here in Indiana. I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. There is this almost arrogance of because we're good, we don't have to worry about the future here. This place we live in is successful in spite of itself. The problem with that is if you get so cocky and arrogant, you forget that you're number one today. That doesn't mean you'll always be number one. And so when we relax and get caught up in our morals about how great we are, and we don't start looking down the future, we don't start looking down the line and start saying, hey, we have a problem coming. It's not possible for us to become, and again, my hometown of Milwaukee or of Gary, where you had all this great stuff, but eventually it's not as great as it used to be. Particularly if you don't start to rise and bring people with you.
Okay, thank you. Ellie, what do you have for us?
Okay, hi, Ellie Westman, President and CEO of Destination Madison. I came on board right after Jason. February will be my 3 years here. I'm new to Wisconsin. I've never lived in Wisconsin before, so I don't have a long history with Zach. Now 2.5 year history with Zach.
But what a good 2.5 years.
Oh, it's been great. So I'm going to flip it a little bit because I'm going to talk a little bit more about quality of life and why people want to move here, or at least I can tell you my experience of deciding if I wanted to move. My husband and I wanted to move to Madison, Wisconsin, or not. But I'm going to start with some numbers because I like numbers. So you can go next slide. In 2022, we had 8.8 million people visit the Madison area, and that created a $1.4 billion of economic impact for our city. And I will tell you, this is Maureen's here with me in the back there from my team, and this was, we reached these numbers thanks to a lot of hard work by the team, because we weren't supposed to reach that number until late 24 or early 25. And we knew that for our businesses to stay healthy, that we needed to get that visitor back in town. And when I say businesses, I'm talking about restaurants and retail and all the stuff that we enjoy doing because we live here every day. What that produced, next slide please, is that for every dollar that Madison spent on conventions, sports, and groups, we got $24 back in our community. And for every dollar we spent in the leisure travel area, we got $22 back in our community. And I just want to mention leisure travelers because going into COVID, we were probably 65% group business, 35% leisure. But we knew from all of our research that leading the charge out of recovery was going to be that leisure traveler because we all stayed home for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. And everybody was ready to get back out and not only see family and friends, but experience new areas. We also created a year-round campaign. We've never done that before. And we're like, hey, we're really fun in the winter and we are really fun in the summer and you should come and experience all the different seasons with us. And that helped us reach that number. Now we're about 50-50 on group versus leisure, which is really great because I think we need to be more diverse in the visitor that is coming to visit us. So next slide. So you're like, that's great. How does it relate to the residents? So next slide. I'm on the board of Destinations International, which is a global organization that really represents DMOs, which we are a destination management organization. And we have this community vitality wheel, and even though Zach and I debate on whether that arrow should start at visit or live, I'm gonna go ahead and share it, and we've updated Zach. So, we're big believers that if you build a community where people wanna visit, they're gonna visit. And if they do that, they're gonna be like, this is a cool place to live, and then they could look at living here. And then if they live here and work here, they're gonna make more investments into our city. Whether that's starting a new business, whether that's serving on committees, whatever that might be, but they're gonna engage and invest in our community. And I tell people this all the time, I have never lived in a community where our citizens were more invested than Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, this is not a city that people just move into and they're like, I'm gonna do my thing, and I don't really care. No, they care. And I was at the city did, a meeting for Lake Monona waterfront. They're like, anybody can come out and give input. And in other cities I'd be like one of 4 people sitting there. And in this one, I was like, are there any chairs left? Because there's like 200 people in the room. And I love that engagement because I think that makes us a healthier city. I do agree with you though, like we can't rest on our laurels, right? We still need to keep an eye on what we're doing and how we are growing. Next slide. So, Destinations International provided some research for us that, what are people looking for when they're considering relocation? And this is just kind of the top list. But if you look at outdoor recreation, attractions, and culinary options, and then of course Zach mentioned climate and weather, that's what we do in hospitality, right? Because we are performing arts and we do represent our sports teams and so forth. And so that quality of life is so important, and we support those businesses to make sure they can stay healthy. National average shows that most retail and restaurant are 50% visitors, 50% residents. So when COVID hit, we were all begging our residents, like, do more, pick up more, order from this, and pick up dinner, because they didn't have that resident influx to make sure that they could keep their doors open and stay healthy. We just had folks visiting from Australia and New Zealand, and the first thing out of their mouth, because they walked around a little bit and they said, holy cow, where are the chains? Because I don't see any. And we're like, well, we have them, but they're kind of far out. If you're in the core of downtown, you are gonna see really cool, independent, chef-driven restaurants in retail. And they just thought that was fantastic. Next slide. So when considering places to relocate to, how are people researching the communities of which they're coming to? So you can see here, probably what we all do, right? Internet research, what about Madison, and so forth. Next slide. And then, we're like, well, how do they learn about our city? 52% of them are going to the state or local tourism bureau's website. And 42% are going to those 2 social media channels. So, next slide. My invitation to you, and then we represent over 850 local businesses in the Madison area. So we are definitely, and I know these guys have heard me say this a million times, but when I'm invited to a meeting, I always say I'm here representing the voice of the visitor, because we're the only ones looking through that lens. Next slide. So what I want to do is invite you to engage with what we're doing to help you when you're working with new clients, or somebody new that's moved to town, or maybe somebody that's just moved into a different neighborhood that they've never lived in before, because our neighborhoods are so extremely different. But we just produced this and we're really excited about it. But this is our new inspiration guide. And really, we changed this up from being a visitor guide, like a traditional visitor guide of list, to really a guide to show this is what it's like to live in Madison. This is what it's like to visit Madison. This thing's like flying off the shelves. People are loving it. And then we created, and yes, I did have to ask what this meant, just so you know, but we created these zines that filled out that lets us tell a little bit deeper dive story about here's what family activities are in Madison, or here's our murals that you can, go out and take a look at. And then we created 2 trails last year that I think and we have quite a few residents doing this, but one is Madison by Bike. Because what we hear a lot, not only from our visitors, but our residents, is like, you guys have great bike trails. They are so confusing. And now we probably don't have the best maps online from the city's perspective and the county. So what we did was we created 4 trails that were a little easier to navigate. And I'm a cyclist, so what I think is really important too is it shows where you can stop, like I need to refill my water bottle, or I need to get some lunch, or I just want to do a little shopping. It shows where you can stop along the trails. So we have these 2, and Maureen brought some of these that we can hand out. And next, this is where you can find us at Destination Madison. We're basically on every social media channel, I think with the exception of Twitter because it just doesn't perform in the visitor space any longer. And next slide. And then, connect with us, visit Madison.com. We have a relocation page. So I just met with somebody yesterday. They're hiring a new executive director. They're getting ready to put the search committee together. He said, I can talk about what we're doing all day long. How do I sell the city? So I highly recommend, we've got great videos, great images on visitmadison.com. We've got the relocation page. And sign up for our newsletter because we're always saying, here's the new restaurants in town, or here's the new retail outlet, or whatever that might be. I think that might be it. Oh, it's not. Here's my brag. So we're 50 years old this year, not quite as old as the chamber, although we were born out of the chamber. And so we are
Look at his face,
I
everybody.
know you do. But we're
Just proud, that's all.
That's exactly right. So anyway, we're gonna celebrate, and we're gonna celebrate on November 29th at the Sylvie, and we'd love for y'all to come out and join us. It's gonna be our industry, the tourism industry, was really resilient during COVID. We were hit first, and we were hit hardest, and we were the slowest to come out of it. We're gonna celebrate those employees for hanging in there with us, for serving all of us when we go into a restaurant, and really just do a big old thank you to them. But we'd love for you to join us.
All right, thank you. Jack, what's all this mean?
Well, I mean, everybody has been talking really positive, now I get to talk. So that's great, sorry. The next 5 to 10 minutes is gonna suck. No, so my name's Chad Lawler, I'm the executive director for the Madison Area Builders Association. If you don't know, we represent the residential construction industry. We have about 100 builders and 300 ancillary members as well, insurance, realtors, et cetera. So we really focus on where we're at for housing, what does construction look like, what are the challenges that we have, what are we moving forward. So I'm just gonna data dump you for a little bit, and then we can get into questions. I can kind of talk a little more into it. So if you haven't noticed, housing prices are going up. The last time the cost of housing did not go up for new construction on average was 2012. Since then, it has gone up over $200,000 for the average house. So currently, the average new construction build is $497,000. The average square footage is down for the first time in a decade, but it's only down like 60 to 100 square feet. So it's still around 2,800 square feet on new home build.
What's that come to per square foot, roughly?
About $173 per square foot.
Okay.
If you can actually get that on a custom build, that's shocking.
Yeah.
So what we have here is, it's a different dynamic in our market. We have custom builders. We don't really have large production builders. We have Meridian, we have a Lennar who's come into the market, but Lennar's built 30, 40 houses and this year, I think 50 or 60 total. Not the 60,000 that they built nationwide, so maybe there's some of that. There's also been discussions of like D.R. Horton and other large, the Toll brothers coming in. So we might have some of that production in the future, but currently we are custom builders. And that is where you see the disconnect. Even though our average is just shy of 500,000, the $500,000 to $700,000 market was super soft this year. In June, July, and August, $500,000 to $700,000 was hard to sell. I think once you get to a certain price point, though, when you're building, individuals are thinking, well, I'm spending this much, I want it custom. I don't want to have to get something that's production. Kind of, oh, here's your 6 different options, and you can get a couple different colors, et cetera. They wanted more customization, so you see the price point going up on that. Most of the builders that speak to me indicate that their 205 is the lowest square foot, price per square foot that they're looking at, and some of them are even tipping 300 plus. Whereas 5 years ago, that same conversation with those same builders were barely over $100 a square foot. You're probably asking why? We have all this demand and need, but there's no housing stock, the current stock. I don't have to speak to you on that. So that adding to it, Jason mentioned Wisconsin needs 130,000 new housing units by 2030. The Capital Area Regional Planning Commission did a study in 2019, their 2020 vision, which said that they needed 100,000 new housing units in Dane County by 2040. That was conservative then. Truly, the number probably should have been 130 to 140,000 in 2019. If we did update it, and Capital Area Regional Planning Commission is looking at doing an update potentially, we're estimating that number is going to be closer to 170.
Now, by housing units, let's start talking, the housing's the elephant in the room. We're housing. So let's kind of start there, but there's other places I wanna go. When you talk about $170,000 housing units by 2040, so 17 years from now, we're gonna need 170,000 more housing units. That's owner occupied and rental?
It includes multifamily.
Multifamily,
Yep.
okay. Talk a little bit, and I think you guys will also have some perspective on this. Talk a little bit about the apartment versus single family mix that we have going on in Madison right now. Because as you drive around, one of the questions I increasingly get, I'm sure you all do too, is who's building all these apartments and who's gonna live in them? What's going on there? I mean, tell us what you know about that.
Yeah, so, yes, the housing units does include multifamily, et cetera, because we can only build, and over the last decade, we've only built 1,300 homes max per year. So,
That's it.
do the math, that's not,
We're not gonna get to 170,000 by 2040.
the biggest issue with that is we've seen there's land issues. Madison, in essence, is landlocked. There's only really one or two properties that could be built for single family. Middleton's landlocked. They finally have an extraterritorial agreement with Springfield to start moving into that territory, but it's going to be segmented: Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3. Verona's had some issues as far as moving into the town of Verona. Town of Verona wants Zone 2 before Zone 1 is complete Zone 1. So land's a huge issue, and even here in Fitchburg, what we're coming to is Fitchburg indicates that they have 7 years of land left within their comp plan. It's really only 3 years, because 4 of those years worth are owned by like Pro Mega or other groups who aren't selling to anybody else. That's for their future growth. And then you add the solar farms onto it, which we're sitting currently right in what the next stage of the comprehensive plan was looking like, and we've been asking for a decade for them to open. That's all going away. There's already 2 solar farms, there's 3 more in the works, and it's in the prime location of where we want to grow. So the biggest issue is for single family homes, we're landlocked in many of the prime communities, and that's why you see Windsor, Forest, Sun Prairie want to keep really growing, and then you get those good schools out there as well. It helps. So you see a ton of apartments growing in all these different municipalities. The breakdown used to be 40 to 60 single family to rental. Lately, 5 years ago, you're looking more in the 45 to 48%. Now it's switched. Some communities are almost at 60% to rental to home ownership.
Jason, I'll start on this question with you. Oh, is there a question over here? I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Love all the stats. How does that relate to other large cities that are experiencing some of the growth that we have in terms of the rental population versus the housing population?
So it tracks. So we're on the lower end of the continuum of the trajectory. When you overlay our economy with Austin 15, 20 years ago, overlay it with Nashville 10, 15 years ago, overlay with Seattle 25, 30 years ago, you see the same trend lines. In fact, we went to Austin 9 years ago, convened their then mayor, city council leadership, business leadership, and said, if you could do it all over again, what would you do different? Right? Same success, but you have hindsight being 2020. And they said 3 things. They said, 1, don't go all in on any one industry. Jason's research shows that we have the most diverse economy in the country, and I mean that from a sector standpoint, that our region, not just Madison, but our region has more penetration into more sectors than anywhere else in the country, so I think we're pretty insulated in that space. Pay attention to your natural resources. For them, with water quantity, for us it would be water quality or other natural resource questions. And then most important, make sure that you are growing in a way that makes sense. And that's transportation, that's the right housing mix. And so the question, I think you said, is who's living in these apartments?
Yeah.
I showed you.
Yeah.
Gen Z, that's who's living here,
Yeah.
which is the fastest growing piece of the population in that.
Well, so the question that I was gonna ask you, Jason, although I think any of you could probably speak to this, is, your job is to try to attract businesses to our region, to help with economic growth. Who are those businesses that you're talking to right now, to the extent you can say generally, if not specifically? And what are the issues that you're stumbling up against already vis-a-vis Zach's answer about, how we can accommodate them and attract them here?
It varies, but we usually see more biotech companies wanting to locate here. We compete very well with labor talent. That's normally never an issue. The report we just issued a year ago where we run into problems is, again, and I think Chad mentioned some of this, is our land. We don't have space. Typically, when we get these RFIs from businesses that are either coming, either want to expand or they're coming from international areas, they're looking for anywhere from 100 to maybe 150 acres. We just don't have the inventory for those kinds of areas. And so that's typically where we lose out if we lose. Because everything else, I'd say we do fairly well. I mean, the three of us sit in these meetings, and outside of that, that's usually either that or something that has to do with water and paying for it. But other than that, we typically struggle with the infrastructure place. Do we have the land, the space to either build these buildings, or can we rehab or refurbish these buildings for those specific companies that want to come in? What we've been looking at doing is, and this is where some of the state legislature, God forbid, would have to maybe get involved, but how do we start looking at what we call land banking? Meaning, can we set up some of these municipalities where they want to start preserving or reserving some of this potential space to build on? It's a heavy lift, but the real issue is we don't really necessarily have the space yet. And then a lot of times it's the deals that we try to structure. And so, would you agree with that? Or
I mean, biotech is,
yeah,
75% of the pitches are doing it.
yeah. You need tech companies.
I was gonna say, we've had some of our members who indicated that they have 5 different biotech companies that are actually local here and want to stay here,
Yeah.
but they don't have space to expand, so then the fear is they might have to move or have a secondary operation. But yeah, biotech's the big one that comes up in every conversation.
And I think it stretches that a little further. I mean, it's really biohealth, right? Like, it's, and if you just stop to think about the skyline, right? It's, you come in on the interstate, it's GE, Daytech, Omida. You come downtown, you get the startups. You come out to Fitchburg, you get Promega. You go out to the west side, you get Exact, you get Research Park and all this. You come in there, you get Accuray, PPD. Then you come in, you get Epic, right? Like, what is that, 10 miles? And
Yeah.
think about the density of biohealth initiative, biohealth innovation.
Well, and this may be a stupid question, but, so I get what you're saying, that we don't have the space or the land. Here, maybe, certainly in Madison.
We have it, it's just not zoned correctly. It's
Yeah.
not- it's not-
Okay, well,
it's
that's
not-
where I was going. So what's the obstacle? What do we have to do? What has to change for that to be fixed? And are we making any progress on that?
I think government has to understand what's going on. I don't think they. I think the executives are starting to realize, I don't think the legislative side of our local governments understand the challenges that are ahead of us and the opportunities that are ahead of us. And if they don't get to see, I mean, you can see this right now in the city council in Madison, that in the pursuit of perfect housing, they are missing opportunities, and the missed opportunities puts us back further. They already gave us the number. We started off the pandemic 4,000, 5,000 units short. So we still have to dig out of that hole before we can even start to try to tackle the hole that you're talking about. So every delay, every debate over how many units and what they are and who can afford them slows us down and makes it less affordable. I mean, I looked at some of the stuff you sent out in 2018. So you sent out that newsletter, I read it religiously. 5 years ago, I just pulled it up as I was sitting here. 5 years ago, there were, for sale, there were 1,603 units for sale in June. This year in June, 706. Chad already said it. It was 280,000 was the median list price. Now it's 420.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? And every other community in this country that has come before us has gone through this. It's a bit of shame on us if we don't figure these things out, and if we don't, putting our head in the sand and pretending like it's not going to happen isn't going to stop the demographics that I showed you in the beginning. They're moving here. All it's going to do is push up prices.
Chad, and Paul has a question, but I also have a follow-up question.
Yeah,
Chad,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, for as welcoming this community is, we've had a lot of NIMBYism as well, and it always blows my mind because the crime that will come here and like these are $1,500 studio apartments. Like, what are you talking about? But I have to give credit. We've been harping on it for our association for decades. That's what we do. We harp on things. But we've been saying, you have to add more land to your comprehensive plans because what you're doing, they're like, oh no, but we project this is what we need. We need 1,200 new houses in the next decade. We'll add an extra 10%. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Thanks for the 10%. But we really need you to like triple that because what you're doing is you're creating a line, and the land inside of it just went up by 5-fold. And the one on the outside selling for ag land and knows they're not going to be in a comp plan for 10 years. And then if your executives or your elected officials are like, well, we don't want to expand, we want to keep it small, despite the fact they're the ones who have the land that they can grow on into, that preservation of land is creating additional issues. And, I bring it back to Fitchburg here. You have Stoner Prairie, and then you have Lacey Road, and right on the other side of Lacey Road is now the solar fields. They leased it at 1/5 of what the total cost they would have sold it for. And now the housing that lines that solar field is selling for $5,000 to $15,000 less than the house the next door in. But now, without it being in the comprehensive plan, having the correct zoning, we're losing out on that land and potentially others. But silver lining, as I mentioned, Springfield's opening up, town of Verona and Verona working on extraterritorial. Fitchburg has come to us and said, we want to add more land. They're going to be redoing their comprehensive plan in 1.5 years after they finish their neighborhood plans. So there's some awareness now. I just fear that it might have been a decade late.
Yeah. Paul, you had a question.
Recently, we're hearing in the news sources that there's a glut of empty office space around, including places like the Jeff downtown. Is it viable, in your opinion, to convert that to residential housing, those kind of buildings?
I mean, my answer is always yes, but.
Zach's not excited about it. Zach, tell us why not. Jason was kind of
Well,
on it too, so.
conversion, I don't think so. I think you take that, I mean, we all know what that building is, right? I mean, you take that sort of Soviet style block building. It's not viable. Now, knock it down, and is that piece of land viable for
Sure.
some kind of mixed use, some kind of development that includes housing? 100%. I will say that we know what makes great downtowns, and if our other sort of partner in all of this, Jason Ilstrup here, he'd say what makes great downtowns is housing with jobs, housing, vitality that comes with restaurants, visitors, things to do. And so we have to be careful as we try to think about the balances. All of this is the risk of overcorrection, and this is what happens when you don't have political leadership that understands what's going on and is only reacting to loud voices, is you can overcorrect. And so if we turn around and we get rid of jobs and we say now we're gonna have housing downtown, that changes economic center of gravity in ways that we don't fully understand. And I'll give you an example of that. Starbucks down the road, just, when I was on the city council and we were trying to figure out highway traffic on Verona Road and PD, we couldn't figure out why people were not taking Verona Road into Madison. That people were coming down PD and then going up Fish Hatch. Starbucks, right? And so like we have to be careful. We have to be careful of the things that we do. We'll talk about the Starbucks on Rimrock now and one on Fish Hatch, right? Because, but we have to be careful of the things that we do. And so I don't think the Jeff building has the ability to redevelop. I think demolish it, build something new, yes, or turn it into more office. I think that the building on the lake, the health and human services building, next to Monona Terrace, I think that would be an incredible condo. I think it would be an incredible hotel. So I do think there are possibilities, but this idea of blanket, let's just take a bunch of office buildings and turn them into housing and that'll solve our problems, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I think you gotta be, to Zach's point, just mindful of the overcorrection. And conversion is one thing, but what we're starting to see is because office space was down, more entrepreneurs and employers are not necessarily looking for all this land or space. So there is not a hardcore trend, but you're starting to see more discussion of business park areas getting turned into neighborhoods, and instead of just having a business park, can we do sort of like what Research Park was doing, where we have that housing component and we can start focusing on neighborhoods. So we're starting to see some of that. I'd be leery of, again, to Zach's point, some of the overcorrection and trying to convert everything to housing, because it's just not, it just won't work, particularly if you don't have the leadership and the zoning stuff correct.
How's the office market downtown right now? You guys have a feel for that?
Yes, I mean, I think Class A office space, they have, a lot of people looking. I think Class B, Class C is struggling. We do know the American Community Survey just came out, 23% of the region's working remotely right now. So down from, we're seeing a recorrection from where we were in the pandemic, but nowhere near the 7, 8, 9% that we were seeing, at least nationwide before. So there will be a change, and to piggyback on what Jason just said, I think the risk that we have to watch for is, well, we all know location, right? It's real estate, it's business, it's the basic cornerstone of the work that you do and that we do. The risk in that is that if we move things around, so if we say the proximity economy conversation that most people don't track, which is everything that's ancillary to the workplace matters. The restaurant, the gas station, the hotel, the grocery store, all those things matter. And if you shift the first thing, where people work, you will shift the thing that follows. And so then what happens when you say, well, none of this exists in these employment centers, then people will say, well, I can't come to work, or there's no restaurants, or there's no retail where you can run out and get something, or there's no grocery stores. And so we have to be careful to pretend like these things are not linked is to our own failure, our own folly at least.
So what does this mean for our downtowns? Because it seems to me that, it's always been sort of an article of faith that a healthy region starts with a healthy downtown. You have to have a destination, Madison, you have to place it, everybody wants to go. Where is this going? Our population's growing, is it gonna come back downtown, are we attracting them, or what's happening?
Well, I would just say from our perspective, Zach hit on it, without people coming back into their office space, it's hurting our restaurants and our retail, right? Because they handle that lunchtime, and we still have restaurants that aren't open their regular hours, meaning pre-COVID hours. So, that quality of those folks coming in and going to lunch or, meeting for the iced tea somewhere to have an afternoon meeting is really important to the economy of downtown from our perspective. So, it hurts and you can see it. And when you have people in and the streets are dead, it doesn't feel like a very, like we have a lot of vitality downtown,
Yeah, I notice when I go downtown in the evenings, it's nuts, it's crazy, but it's very vital. When you go down during the day, during the week, it just does not feel like it used to. Yeah, question?
I would love to hear you guys speak a little bit more about that equity piece, because we've been talking about like this generational wealth and like investing in that. And obviously we know that like the price of homes is going way up right now. And I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that that equity piece in all of this, since you're talking about like the NIMBYism and all that goes along with that.
Why are you all looking at the black dude?
You're the one that said it.
I'm just
Deal.
Oh, that was funny.
I was actually gonna look to Zach because I know what
I'll
Chamber is
I
doing.
did because we've had conversations about this, so I looked at you.
No, I think it starts with, there's a lot of components that factors into it, right? From education to programs, I think one of the things that I've always been an advocate of is if we really want to start talking about equity and wealth, where does it start, right? And so it starts with, and this is just because I'm a huge fan of financial business literacy, and I think it should be taught in school. That's just me. I do believe that you have to look at where is our economy at and how do we strengthen neighborhoods and certain demographics to exist when a pandemic comes. And for me, that means while we can focus on retail things and construction things, if we say we don't need more Black folks or more women or more Latinos in STEM, science, technology, engineering, jobs that can maintain and sustain a neighborhood, then what are we doing, right? And so I think there's a lot of components that start and you have to feed into that. We talk about equity and capital as far as venture capital and businesses. Who's doing that kind of technical training so that you can empower people to be self-sufficient? I'm not necessarily, government programs are a two-edged sword, right? Because to a certain degree, if you're not careful, it's modern day slavery. When you set people up to depend on government, they're not free. And so we have to start looking at these things to go, what do we need to do to make sure that a person can be self-sufficient and build a neighborhood? That means they have to have good schools, because contrary to popular opinion, good schools are what attracts good neighborhoods. It's not the other way around. Wherever there's a good school, you will find a good neighborhood. And so we have to look at those things and then develop these relationships with our people and friends who, believe that all tides lift, or a rising tide lifts all boats. We can't be just consistent or suffice with government programs, or let's just put people into plumbing. Great job. I think there's a role for that. We can't just say, let's go to college. Everybody's not meant for college. So I think there needs to be, quite honestly, an overhaul on how we talk about equity and diversity, because quite honestly, I think it's been a buzz phrase for so long that people don't even really know what it is. And so diversity and equity doesn't mean you need to treat people different. It just means you need to find a way to treat people the way everybody else should be treated. And I think it starts with that mindset and culture first.
I'm gonna go to Zach and then to Ellie.
I think that's the right question. You said equity, right? I mean, it's the right word. I think everything Jason said around equity, I think illustrates some of the challenges with it. But equity is different than equality, right? If you think about equity from a business perspective, or from a home perspective, it means you own something, right? And so when we talk about equality as a community, it means being given a seat at the table, or equity means that you own a piece of the community, that you own a seat at the table. And I think that's where, if we're going to make a difference, instead of trying to nibble around the edges, but not only can we, but we have to, right? When I think about what our risks are 10, 20, 30, 40 years out, I think this is the reason we fail. I think that as a community does not reflect the world, does not reflect the customer that we're trying to sell to, I think those are going to be the reasons why we truly stumble as a community if we don't wrap our head around it, our hands around it. But we're trying to do it wrong, right? Well, so what we're saying is, and we saw it in the paper today, Jason alluded to his front page of the State Journal. It's where you can live and afford to live in Madison if you're Black, right? I mean, it was the gist of the story. It's a shrinking amount of places that you can live. Then the mayor says, we have no tools, right? We have tools, it's approval, right? I mean, it's your number one tool, which is we have to build our way out of the problem that we're in, which is to build more housing, to create more affordability, then government programs, then land banking, then all of the things, creative, innovative models that allow us to not just create access points to housing, but also create opportunity to create real wealth, generational, transportable wealth has to be the focus of this community. But the question you're asking is 100% right. It's equity. It's not equality. It's not inclusion. It's not diversity. At its core, it is how do people of color, or how do women, or how do people who have historically disadvantaged have an opportunity to own a piece of this sort of community.
Ellie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add two things there. One is, I think the Southside neighborhood is a very good example of it could grow wrong, right? Because with what the Urban League is doing, with the Black Business Hub, with what Reverend G is doing, with the Heritage Center, what Central Hispano is doing, all of a sudden this neighborhood is really blossoming, which it hasn't for a while. And so I was meeting yesterday with Zion Baptist Church, and he said, somebody moved out of their house and sold it. It's 800 square feet and they sold it for $300,000. This is what basically removes people from neighborhoods that maybe they've been historically in, or maybe they want to be in. And so we have to be really careful about that, because in as much as we want growth, especially in our historic neighborhoods, we want to make sure that the people who are already living there, already invested in that neighborhood, can stay in their neighborhood. And so when I got to town we had a lot of discussions internally about what our relationships were with different organizations in town. And I went out and met with Urban League, and we met with Central Hispano, and we met with the Black Chamber. We met with all of them. And on the tourism side of things, we're still down about 5,000 employees of where we were pre-COVID, and we were down pre-COVID. And so when I went to these organizations and I'm like, tourism is a great place to build a career. Now, I'm a little biased because I've been in tourism my whole career, but it is. And one of the beautiful things I think about tourism is that, are there jobs where you need a college degree? Absolutely. Can you grow a really great career without one in tourism? You can. But what I heard was, we don't want to only be dishwashers. We don't want to only be housekeepers. How can we train people to know there's better growth? So we've worked really hard the last couple of years. We've worked with DPI, and we now have a growth plan. So we're like, hey, if you start as, I'll just use an example, a lifeguard, then these are your growth areas. And if you get to all the way to here, you don't need a degree to do that. If you have a degree, great. That's awesome. But I have a lot of hotels tell me, if somebody comes in and works really hard and does a great job, I'm going to keep them and I'm going to move them up. And so I think it's all of those conversations of like, how do we protect our neighborhoods to make sure we keep the essence of our really important neighborhoods? But then what are those growth plans that we can share and help train people on, so they understand how they can get into your industry or mine or Jason's or Chad's or whomever. And so that was really important for us to do, because our industry keeps telling us we don't have enough workers, but we got big parts of our population that don't want to work with us because they think it's a dead end place to go. And we've got to educate that it's not. So those are some of the things we're working on our end too.
I was just gonna add a couple points. So I brought up earlier, like the median house is 500,000 for new construction. In essence, you have to have a household income of $120,000 to afford to build the average house in Madison now. And that's 24.5% of our population. So 3/4 of our population cannot get the average house in this entire community. So when we talk about equity and everything, there's a lot of people who need to be brought up. And sometimes it's, we did the project with the Boys and Girls Club because, again, we're in major labor shortage. It's one of the key indicators and factors in why housing has grown so exponentially in costs, because we don't have the labor to build enough. But what we continue to hear from the individuals and the families and the youth that come through there is they don't hear about opportunities. There's no connect the dots in the schools. DPI focuses more on your grade is based on your how many kids go to college versus how many kids are like career ready, et cetera. And so when the system is set up in a way that prohibits or doesn't push out information on family sustaining jobs, be it in tourism, hospitality, construction, I mean, there's issues that lie in there. And I can't just throw it on the education. Like our industry just this year, or in the last 5 years, has started to look beyond just, oh, okay, before it was like, oh, just go get the farm kids. Well, the farm kids historically are white male that are coming into the industry. And now we wonder, why do we have 7% of the industry is African-American, 11% is women, but only out of that 11%, 1% is actually in the field. The other 10% is office, sales, et cetera. So we have to be intentional in what we do as industries and as companies as well.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Roger.
What can we do to get some condos built as opposed to apartment buildings? Or have conversion of apartment buildings into condos so we can have something for lesser income people?
And seniors too.
See, seniors are a big one. We could unlock a lot of inventory for a move out, they're not moving up, they're moving down, they're moving into their, and condos is the perfect place. We got nothing. Yeah. Chad, you want to start with that one?
So I can say we have tons of builders who would love to build condos. The biggest issue coming out of the recession was financing. It was nearly impossible to get to build condos. So that has started to kind of lessen a little bit. And there's been some ways that builders have found that they can do a condo development in areas that don't necessarily allow them. But there's also interest from municipalities who want to do it. Now, unfortunately, I say, oh, there's this opening and kind of softening in the finances. Well, now locally, a lot of banks are actually pulling back on their financing for development. So if you're looking to go and do this very large, huge development, but you've only done one, or maybe this is your first development, they're not gonna fund you right now. They're looking more for deposits than they are for lending, and it's requiring larger and larger sums. Spec homes, condos that kind of fit in this, they're not 7%. Builders pay 12 to 13% interest. And then comes to one of the issues that you see with all housing availability and affordability, is holding costs and the timing of fees. Middleton just came out and said they're looking at the potential of moving a bunch of impact and park fees from the development stage to the home building permit. And then the question is, well, what's that gonna do? Well, 2 years of not paying 12% interest on a $2 million loan is a fair amount of change that can be then divvied up into those 100 lots, into the 200 lots at a lower price point than what the developer would be paying. So I think there's a lot of different things, but financing has generally speaking been the biggest impediment.
It always used to be, and tell me if this is still the case, or at least what I heard was that coming out of the last recession, the bank would routinely want to see like 50% pre-sale before you could even break ground or get your construction loan. Is that still the case? That was always the reason I heard before.
Right, we constantly still hear that as kind of one of the issues, if they can even get the financing in general.
At all.
I mean,
Yeah, which is logistically just difficult from the developer's point of view. It's a chicken and egg problem.
There's also an end-of-life financial liability challenge that developers are trying to figure out, or builders are trying to figure out, which is there's a quirk in the law that allows condo associations to sue the developer years later for errors or potential errors that are made. So now you're carrying potentially a legacy liability that you've long since sold every unit, you're still liable for it. So it's a multitude of factors.
right. That's why.
How's that different than a single family builder, the liability?
Well, liability usually after 7 years, you're kind of clear on it, but
Plus, it's one unit as opposed to the whole thing in a condo association and all of that. Mary, you had a question? Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I got one online that's coming in that's kind of involved with this. It says, how can we encourage or incentivize more owner-occupied homeownership opportunities and types, especially on the isthmus? A lot of rental housing is being built, but they're asking, what about condos and row houses? So I guess on this line of conversation, what can we do to encourage and incentivize more of that?
I think part of it, I won't speak directly to the isthmus, but in other communities, density is like a derogatory word. For instance, we're in Pittsburgh and high density is, I think, 7+ units. In Madison.
Per acre?
Right.
Yeah.
So in Madison, what low density is higher than that. So we have these different varying definitions of what density levels are. And then if you put on an agenda, there's a high density unit coming in next door to you, you will lose your mind because you think, oh my God, here's 300-400 people when it's a 7-unit row house. And so I think there's some issues in that. And people also assume that density means all those negative connotations, but it also means, oh, this is changing what our community is. When really density doesn't necessarily mean that it's changing the look of your community. You're no longer going to be hometown USA. Well, no, you're going to be the same. We're not saying everything has to be super high 200-unit complexes, but at least let us do maybe like some 12 units or something in that regard.
I would say it is, I said to you before what Austin said, right? And density is part of that planning challenge. It is the solution, right? We're not gonna, it started off by saying we need more land. That's a decade-long fight that we may never actually win. So the only other solution then is to do nothing, and then you end up Boulder, Colorado, where homes are $900,000. The entire hospitality workforce lives on the other side of a mountain. So the only solution is density. You talked about the Regional Planning Commission, I spent 10 years as a commissioner. I never voted for a single urban extension, sewer extension that didn't involve higher density. Like we have to just say unequivocally that density is it's approvals and rapid approvals, it's fees, and it's density. I mean, those are the only tools that are in front of us right now, and we have to just capitalize on what the tools that we have.
Mary, you had a question?
Well, so this is the tools. The question I was going to ask was real specific about condos and helping people see it to believe it. are builders using technology to, I mean, could you build a model offsite, but then be able to virtually walk them through where their view is gonna be for 8 floors up or what have you? But then to Zach's point about density, are we using that with projects or proposals for downtown and for legislators to then see what it is and what we are missing out on? Because you just can't, people can't wrap their heads around this stuff. So it's a pronged question, but I'm curious how we can marry the dreaded technology.
Yeah, well, I
for
think
people to see it.
a lot of the individuals that we work with are tech friendly and tech forward. The problem is, this goes back to that conversation about custom versus production. We have many, like, we might have 95 to 98% of our builders and developers in this area are small.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult for a small builder to have a model or even like a unit within one. And often they're only doing an 8 unit, and then 3 years later, they'll do another one. So this is really leaving it to only a handful of large developers, primarily downtown, that are gonna be able to use some of those tools to the best of the ability and make it functional and make it so they're not losing 1 or 2 units worth.
Which is why I withheld the question when it was just about the condos, but I do mean it. I mean, having seen the Historical Society at DMI's meeting show us the fly through of their space, and that's what made me think of it, is to have the ability to really see the potential of residential downtown.
I think it's great if you can show them, because I agree with you. One of the things that we have to really get back to and address is this sort of mindset, right? It is a cultural mindset, doesn't matter where you're from, but there are literally people who, and this is from your elected officials, who really don't have a vision. So that's your first problem. If you have elected officials that don't have a vision, you're gonna run into this status quo, not willing to move or be innovative. I've literally had people, and Freddie is our community development specialist. We've literally had people tell us we don't want to grow. We've literally had people say that to us. And so you run into this, I guess what we call cave, which is citizens against virtually everything. Right? So no matter what you throw at them, there's this mindset, and I don't know if it's a fear, as the panel was saying, but I think it really starts with a lot of heavy lifting in education, that this is either you do something, you grow, or what's the worst case scenario? You do nothing. And if doing nothing is what you really want, we have to show this is what that will look like in the future. So I really do think it's an education.
And that leads me to the next place that I really want to go is, Zach, you mentioned that this is gonna fail. You mentioned equity as being one of the big things, but there are a lot of ways that this could go wrong. I mean, you all made a very persuasive case that Madison, Dane County, this region is growing. And if we do in fact need 170,000 more units in the next 17 years, that's 10,000 per year by my math, then the caves are not going to, that's not an option. So what in your mind, that certainly, but what in your mind are the biggest obstacles and pitfalls and issues that we as a region are going to have to confront over the next 17, 20, 25, 30 years during the span of those of us in this room who can work on it? What are our biggest obstacles? What are our biggest threats? Jason, do you want to start? We'll just run down.
I think for me, it's always the people. It's always leadership to me. It always boils back to the people. If you don't have a vision of what you want to be, then what are you shooting for? You're just existing. If that's the case, I mean, it won't take long for that to go wrong. So have a goal or a mindset of what you want to be. I agree with Ellie. The beautiful thing about this community is that everybody gets involved. Like everybody gets involved. But where is the, and we've all talked about this on this panel, trying to have a cohesive message, and I think we do an okay job of that, but we have to decide, our leaders, what do we want to be known for? And how do we grow that? And part of my job is
selling the other regions, saying, listen, it's not a Madison or Dane County versus Jefferson or Columbia, because from a regional point of view, it's all of us against North Carolina Research Triangle. It's not us against each other. The competition now is much more global. And so how do we lean into one another and still keeping our identity? But how do we work together to make our region grow? And so for me, it always comes back to leaders who have a vision of what they want to see. Because once you have a vision, you'll start to take steps to garner the right people to exceed, to get to that vision.
Agree, Ellie? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Jason. I grew up in Northern Illinois, but I started my career in Nashville, Tennessee. And when I started my career there, I mean, literally, they were like, you gotta be out here by 6. Like I worked downtown. And they're like, if you're not out of here by 6, it's dangerous for you to walk to your car. We roll the streets up at night. And I was able to work with really great leadership to do some things to make Nashville a little bit well known. It was an interesting job back in the day because nobody wanted to come to Nashville. I mean, we were just scrappy as can be. To a degree, I think Madison reminds me of that time period, although people want to come to Madison because we're super cool. And so through good leadership, we had a mayor at the time that said, you know what we're going to do to revitalize downtown is we're going to build an arena right downtown. We had no team. We had nothing. And he's like, we'll just start with concerts in the circus, right? And just start filling up. And then we were able to bring the Predators in. So it's like good leadership did that. But where did it go wrong? Everywhere else, right? I was in Franklin, so I've been in the Nashville area twice. I was in Franklin. Our average home price was $685,000, right? Can't drive anywhere. When I first lived in Nashville, you could get anywhere you wanted to get in 15 minutes. Now it takes you an hour and a half. And so the infrastructure is just horrid. Nobody likes to invest. None of the citizens like to invest in infrastructure because as much as they like to complain about it, they don't want to pass anything to do something about it. I think Madison has an opportunity right now because we see that growth and it's coming. And whether the caves like it or not, it's coming anyway. So we either have an opportunity to be like, oh, well, it's coming. What's going to happen? Or we could say it's coming. Where is our strategic plan to make sure that we are doing this in the best way possible so our quality of life stays really strong and great, because that's what it comes down to, right? So, you know, I mean, I go to Nashville now, I can't hardly stand it there. And maybe because I had my other experience, but it's just bad. You can't afford a house. I mean, it's just a whole different experience. Some people love it, but to me, it's another New Orleans. You know, it's another Vegas, you know, experience there. So I think now is the time. And I will tell you, these conversations alone are worlds ahead of where Nashville was back in the day. Just to sit down and be like, hey, what are we going to do? Is so much farther ahead. And this city collaborates really, really well. Our organization, Chad, I don't know you very well, but I'm sure we would collaborate well if we did. And so we're constantly reaching out and being like, what about this? What else? I saw this. So I think we have nothing but opportunity, but we really need to do it very strategically and with a lot of thought. And I do believe leadership makes a difference because I was there initially with a mayor that was phenomenal. And I was there with a mayor who wasn't, and it was night and day, right? Yeah.
Zach, what do you think?
I'd say what I showed you on the screen to start is happening, right?
Right.
I'm not,
Right.
I say it's a crystal ball, it's the die is cast. And so if you go back to 1960 and you think about you're a young engineer, young innovation economy, what it was in the 60s, where do you think you would have gone? What was Silicon Valley in 1960? The United States. Detroit. Right.
Really?
Yeah. That was the center of innovation in the world with the American automotive industry in 1960. And so they knew then, right? They probably had the same panel, some version of it, sitting with real estate agents saying like the die is cast, what we do in the future matters. And that's a perfect example. Jason started with it. He said, Gary, Detroit, right? You can look around and say, the die's cast, but if it's not cast correctly, it breaks, right? And it can't withstand the pressure that's going to be put on it. And so our challenge now is, if we know what's going to happen, can we plan into it? Can we not be tactical, but can we be strategic about it? I think you did a great job putting together the right panel, because the answer to your question is the future of what we need to do is understand the economy and plan for what it looks like in the future. It's to use other people's money to help grow our economy and bring visitors and tourists into it It is to build the housing that we need, and it's to have the right mix of people and jobs that can fill that equation. And so there's a balance between those things. That what the work we do is the future of where we need to get to, but you've got to stop electing people who don't get it. You've got to help us push back on people who say, not in my backyard, right? Like, there are things that we may have to do to jump ahead that feel weird right now. The Gen Z demographic is a perfect example. They are challenging every norm that is out there, right? Everything that we think is conventional is being challenged by Gen Z. We can either resist it, we can wait till they are in the corner office, or we can lean into it and say, I might have some discomfort in what makes you comfortable, but let me get ahead of the curve and be comfortable in that discomfort. So if that means that ancillary units are now built on single family lots, we should be leaning into that. If that means that you can't build a single family home or a whole neighborhood of just single family homes, we should lean into that. If that means that downtown needs to be high rises, whether that's condo or rental, we'll need to lean into that. If that means that we have to better understand that some of us are going to have to take the bus or take some form of transit and transportation, if we don't start leaning into those, if we just say, I like it the way it is, and I'm going to keep it the way it is, not only will we not potentially not be able to live here, but I can promise you that our kids in the next generation will not be able to live here because we will be Detroit or one of those other cities because we got it wrong. And I just say, look across the country at those dark blue circles I showed you. Seattle, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Boston. Any of you want to live there right now? Probably not.
Yeah, so I will not repeat what's been said, even though I agree with it. I guess it's kind of a little repeat, but we have had decades of the same systems in place. So everything that we work off of right now at the municipal level for growth and development is been developed when we didn't have the horizon of the speed of growth. We've had growth, but the speed of it. And there's been that level of the NIMBYism or oh, we're small, let's stay small. This is our community. Problem is, even if individuals get into elected or staff positions, those systems have to be changed. And that's not an overnight process. And it only takes one or two individuals to derail an entire process. I mentioned earlier that Springfield has kind of finally opened up to Middleton starting to move into there. Thankfully, they have an agreement that should be ironclad, but I mean, nothing really truly is. It could take one or two people that come into Springfield and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to sue Middleton. This is going to put the brakes on. So individuals make a big difference. And I would say this to our members, so I'll say it to you. The Realtors Association has a PAC. Give to it. Go. Yeah, you're welcome.
I did not plant him.
Right. It makes a difference when you're there in person as well. I've been to so many different municipal meetings, and like I went to a Dane County water lakes and watershed meeting, and I was the only person there, and they literally asked me, Chad, why are you here? What did we do wrong? And I was like, oh no, I'm just coming to see what you guys are up to. You know, it's been a while, I'm just coming to hang out. And so there's so few people that come to these meetings. The ones that do come have the voice. If you bring 15 people to a meeting, everything you want will get passed. So just get it on the agenda, go to the meeting and talk to it. Because our elected officials are individuals who have other jobs. They're not experts in lots of areas. And that's one of the reasons why the lobbying industry will always be there, because there's experts that work in different fields, and they're talking to individuals who work in a completely separate industry, and they listen to the voice that speaks to them. So we need to get more people in the rooms at meetings. We need to give more to get the elected officials correct up front.
This is maybe a little bit of those are great answers, by the way. Really interesting. This is getting almost, I don't want to ask this question because I feel like I'm getting granular and I'm going backwards, but one of the things that you've all alluded to or mentioned is transportation. And it strikes me that we're going to have to create, we're on an isthmus, just like Seattle. And my brother lives in Seattle, and trying to get from his house in Mukilteo down to the SeaTac is a 2-hour proposition minimum. It's a mess. We don't want to be that. What are we doing, and what should we be doing? Because we're going to grow out, right? We're gonna have to, but we're also gonna be coming in. We've gotta get people in and out. What should we be doing? What's underway? And
Well, has anybody sit in traffic on east-west lately? We're building bus rapid transit.
yeah,
We are.
tell people about that, because I bet a lot of people don't know what's going on.
Yep, so we're also about 10 years behind than when we should have built it. Because we sat around debated whether we should have rail, instead of just getting ahead of and start building, we could have been a decade ahead on that one. So starting next year, running east-west, so running essentially East Town Mall to West Town Mall. You'll be able to get on an articulated bus, rapid transit, no fare box, so you buy a ticket. You'll actually load on the left side, on the median side, and you'll be able to rapidly get close to downtown. You'll be like a block or two off the square. Won't get you right to the square, but it'll get you close enough. You can take feeder buses in. There'll be parking rides. You'll be able to have internet, so you'll be able to do your work on the bus. And so solving for the challenge of, how many people remember the Beltline pre-pandemic, pre-extension lane, right? Like we're all like, we're like, this is, you said 15 minutes, it started to feel like 18, which is, but we could already, Nashville, Portland, Seattle,
Atlanta.
Austin, Atlanta, you just sit in traffic, right? And so we're headed in that direction. I think the good news is that the east-west routes are under construction. It's a little bit painful today because we're all stuck in traffic trying to get around those construction. North-south is in the capital budget for the city, but it's also to get the surrounding communities to realize that if you're building, right, if you are going to expand from Middleton to Springfield, start thinking about what is the transportation infrastructure. Like, if we stop and say like, it's only my only responsibility is approval, I don't have to participate in the full vision, then you're just adding and contributing to the challenge of that's in front of us. So this won't take any car off the road. It'll just help us get other people moving who might have to have taken a car. So it doesn't take any existing car off the road. Long term, I think this is what Austin warned. Austin is trying to, they just passed $1 billion bond initiative to retrofit their entire train system because they had a train that literally went nowhere that made any sense because it was the only place they could put it was just because that's what existed. Nashville failed a $2 billion initiative to redo their infrastructure. Excuse my language, they're screwed. I wouldn't move to Nashville at this point because it's not gonna get any better, it's only gonna get worse. And so we need to be smart collectively, stop thinking tactically and start thinking long-term strategically. And you've heard, at least Jason and I, but probably everybody else on this panel at some point, use the word ecosystem. How you have to start thinking about this stuff. It is all intertwined. None of this, housing does not stand on its own. Jobs do not stand on their own. Go back to Ellie's chart, and she's right, we'll debate where you start, but it's all intertwined. It's an ecosystem, and if you break one thing or you overdo on one area or overcorrect, you're going to mess up somewhere else, and that's how we have to all start thinking about it. It's not just real estate. You have to start thinking about yourselves as community builders and think about beyond just selling a house. You have to figure out how people are going to get to the house, where they're going to shop, where they're going to recreate, where they're going to work. All those things matter.
Jason, do I add to that? And then we'll wrap.
Yeah, really quickly. So as we're talking about ecosystems, a lot of the things that we all consider is housing, transportation, and childcare. Huge issue.
I wanted to bring that up too.
Huge issue. One of the things we're doing at MadRep is looking at how do we start these van pools. We have a pilot program. Here's where we need employers to start taking some initiative to say, hey, let's start getting some of these vehicles off the road where we can travel or have 4 or 5 people traveling from a neighborhood back and forth to work. Now we're, again, adding to the ecosystem. And so I think it's our approaches is all hands on deck. What do we need to do at every turn? And so I think it's just looking at that transportation, all facets of it, and really thinking about childcare, housing, how those all play a role, because they do connect.
Is there anything we can do about the childcare piece? I know we're almost out of time.
Yeah. Public-private partnership, the solution is not just government money.
Yeah.
So businesses should be thinking about it as a benefit, right, to employees. Businesses should be giving, developers should be giving free land to childcare because it'll make people want to work next to childcare facilities. Developers, when building big new residential areas, should be thinking about committing a piece to either at a discount or on a 99-year lease for $1 or whatever it is. I think banking has to start to change the way they think about it. I think it's an all hands on deck. I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's the most pressing thing that we can tackle today.
I mean, it's almost one of those things we have, like park impact fee, traffic impact fees. Like at some point, I'm not advocating for additional fees. Don't get me wrong. But how many more parks do we need in a singular area? Is it better if that funding somehow could go, if we were going to use the funding, let's use it in an area that is more needed than necessarily more green space that then has ongoing costs to the municipality to upkeep, and 6 people will go there on a Thursday, but there's a few hundred that need a daycare center.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, plus that doesn't help the density.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. We're almost out of time. Last thoughts. Chad, we'll go with you and we'll run down.
So I started super negative. But I think one of the positives is there is so much growth. And you gotta think about, we're having 170,000 more housing units come in some way or somehow. There's going to be that demand. There's the need for what we all do as an industry to ensure. And I think we're at the turning point where municipalities and leaders are starting to see it as well. And so I just, again, kind of urge you, use your voice, use your connections to make sure that as we develop in a positive manner and one that takes into account the business, the transportation, the childcare versus, oh, well, we don't want to do that. Well, that's, and, because that type of attitude inhibits us. We have to kind of be open. And I always kind of think, we have to act early and act small, but think big, and never really limit ourselves what our thoughts are, but we have to start today.
I mean, I think the good news is that 99% of this country would envy the situation that we're in. Right? The slides that I started with, like that would be the
No
envy
question.
of this country. And
No
so
question.
what we should be striving for is to live up to our potential. And I think that's just every day we should wake up and be thinking about what's the potential of this region? How do we get there? And can we always be doing better? And I think if we start with a mindset of better, never done when it comes to solving these problems, I think we can get there. And I think there's a potential for a Madison model that is different than the Seattle model, that's different than the Austin model or the Nashville model. And it sets the tone for the next generation of cities like ours.
Ellie.
I would agree with Zach. These are big challenges that we have ahead of us. But if we didn't have these challenges, our other challenges would be worse.
That's right.
And more difficult.
Much rather be growing than shrinking.
That's exactly right. So I would just say, please keep the conversation going because it's really important. And it's really important to get a lot of voices in that conversation because there's a lot of different perspectives of even childcare. I sat here thinking about childcare and tourism and the challenges we have in that area. And then I would just say, use tourism if you need help with, if you're like, I need a brochure on this, or my client likes to do this. Never feel shy to reach out to us because we either have it or we can figure out how to get it to you. And we want to make sure that we're supporting your efforts as well.
I'll close on this, that economic development, you all, is about people. It's always about people. So be willing to commit to a future that you may not be around to see.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about you or us. It's about the future. And so be willing to commit what you don't know. Don't be a cave. Don't be a jerk. Commit to just the future and be kind. That's it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.